My beloved brother, my dear sister, sometimes Allah allows you to love someone so deeply, so sincerely, that it feels like they're part of your soul, and then He takes them away, not to punish you, but to remind your heart who it truly belongs to. You loved with sincerity, but they weren't written to stay. You didn't love them with games. You didn't play with their emotions. You weren't there out of boredom or loneliness or curiosity. You were there with sincerity, with your whole heart. You had no secret agenda. You weren't trying to gain something. You weren't pretending. You truly believed they were part of your future. You saw them as a blessing. You thought maybe, just maybe, this was the answer to the du'as you'd whispered for so long. Because everything felt so aligned, so peaceful, so written. And so, with good intentions, you opened your heart. You started imagining a life with them. You prayed. You asked Allah for guidance. You even said those honest words so many believers say with trembling sincerity. Ya Allah, if this is good for me, bring it closer. If it's not, then remove it. But please remove it gently. And that's the part that hurts the most, doesn't it? Because when they finally left, it didn't feel like a gentle removal. It didn't feel like mercy. It felt like your chest had been ripped open, like something sacred had been taken from you, something you gave only once and carefully. It felt like your soul was trying to make sense of a door that was slammed shut without warning, without clarity, without closure. You started asking the questions that only the broken-hearted ask in the silence of the night. Why would Allah allow me to feel something so real if it was never meant to last? Why would He let love grow if He already knew it would die? What was the purpose of all that hope, all that prayer, all that patience if this was the ending? But my dear brother, my beloved sister, listen carefully. Allah knew, He always knew from the first heartbeat, the first glance, the first time you whispered their name in your dua. He knew this person would not stay. And still, He allowed the connection. Still, He allowed the attachment. Still, He allowed your heart to expand. Why? Because there was something your soul needed to learn. And only this kind of love, the kind that doesn't last, could teach it. Some lessons, you see, don't come through ease. They come through emotion, through depth, through loss, through loving someone so deeply and then learning how to release them completely. Allah didn't let you love them because they were your forever. He let you love them because they were your mirror. They reflected parts of you that were sleeping. They brought out parts of you that were hidden. They showed you your own sincerity, your loyalty, your gentleness, your patience. And then by leaving, they showed you what still needed healing, what you were depending on too much, what you were attaching to, hoping it would fill the space in your heart. And in that painful absence, you were brought back to Allah, not with a casual return, but with brokenness, with surrender, with the kind of tears that purify a soul more than 1,000 moments of joy ever could. Because when we love someone deeply and they leave, we realize very quickly that there's only one who truly stays, only one who hears every silent cry, only one who knows the full story, even when people walk away without explanation. And that one is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, the one who takes not to hurt you but to protect you, the one who allows your heart to stretch only so He can guide it back into His hands again. No, your love wasn't wasted. Not one second, not one prayer, not one smile or tear or act of kindness. Allah saw it all. And Allah, in His divine wisdom, knew that the love you gave would not go to waste. He simply chose to use it not to build a future with that person, but to build a stronger you, a purified you. A version of you that doesn't just trust in love, but trusts in Allah's timing. A version of you that understands. Perhaps you love something and it is not good for you, and Allah knows while you know not. Quran 2:216. And when you think about it now, would you really want to hold on to something that Allah, in His mercy, was removing for your protection? Would you really want to build a future with someone who wasn't part of your soul's healing, only part of your soul's test? You were not abandoned. You were guided. You were not rejected. You were redirected. You didn't lose because you loved. You were loved by Allah enough to be saved before you fell deeper. And one day, when your heart has fully surrendered to what was written, you'll thank Him not just for what He gave, but for what He removed. Because what He has written next will never have to leave to teach you anything. It will arrive as mercy. It will stay with peace. And it will be written in a way that never breaks your heart, just to build your faith. That love was never the destination, it was the test. You thought they were the one who would finally complete you. The missing piece, the calm after the storm, the answer to every tear you ever cried behind closed doors. You told yourself, maybe this is who Allah kept me waiting for. Maybe this is the person who will help me feel whole again. Because they didn't just arrive, they felt right, familiar, so easy to speak to, so natural to care for, so comforting to imagine a future with. You smiled more, you felt safe again. You began to breathe in ways your heart had forgotten. And you started believing that maybe, just maybe, this was the person Allah had created for you. But they weren't sent to complete you. They were sent to correct you. Because only someone who awakens the deepest parts of your heart can also expose the areas of your soul that are still unfinished. You thought they were the healing, but in truth, they were the mirror. Their presence reflected the places in you that were still broken, the parts that still needed to be realigned with your Creator, the wounds you thought had healed, but were just hidden under years of distraction and silence. Through them, Allah showed you what still lived inside your chest. The fears you carry, the expectations you quietly place on people, the hidden belief that someone else can rescue your soul from loneliness. Sometimes Allah sends someone not to stay, but to trigger a change, to touch a soft place that has been neglected for too long, to teach you something your comfort zone could never show you. Because there are parts of you that can only be corrected through the presence and the absence of someone your heart truly cared for. And if they had stayed, you would have never seen it. You would have kept thinking, they complete me. They are the source of my peace. Not realizing you were building your identity around something temporary. And Allah, in His mercy, refused to let your soul become dependent on a creation. So He used them not as punishment, but as correction. Not to shame you, but to save you. Sometimes the people we think are meant to stay forever are only written to walk with us for a few steps. Just long enough for us to see ourselves differently. Just long enough to feel something that shakes the heart awake. They don't complete you. They reveal you. They open doors inside of you that you didn't even know were locked. Their smile makes you feel value. Their words make you feel worthy. Their company makes you feel understood. And suddenly, you realize how much of yourself you had silenced, just waiting to be seen. But when they leave, you realize something even greater. If someone's presence had the power to make you feel whole, then maybe you weren't as whole as you thought. Allah doesn't want you to be half of a person. He doesn't want your peace to be borrowed from someone else's behavior. He doesn't want your stability to be built on another human's presence. So He allowed someone to come close, close enough to open your heart, but not close enough to keep it. Because that distance, that heartbreak, that confusion, it brought you back to yourself. And more importantly, it brought you back to Him. You see, the most dangerous kind of emptiness is the one we try to fill with people. And the most powerful kind of correction is the one that comes through love. Love that shakes you. Love that breaks you. Love that opens your soul and whispers, this is not who you are meant to be. There's more. Keep growing. Sometimes Allah uses people to correct our hearts in ways books never could, in ways sermons never reached, in ways that go straight to the soul. Because this isn't just about love. It's about awakening. It's about spiritual alignment. It's about cleaning the heart from the inside out. You thought this was a story about two people, but it was always a story about you and Allah, about how far you drifted, about how tightly you were holding on to people, and how gently Allah wanted you to let go so you could hold on to Him again. Don't be angry that they couldn't stay. Be grateful that they were allowed to come close enough to teach you what still needed to change. That's not failure, that's divine intervention. And maybe one day you'll look back at this love not with pain, but with peace. Knowing it didn't complete you, but it corrected you. And through that correction, you became someone new, someone deeper, someone softer, someone closer to Allah. So don't ask why they left. Ask what their presence revealed. Because when Allah sends someone to correct you, He's already preparing someone else to complete you. But only when your heart is ready. Only when you're whole on your own. Only when you no longer confuse correction with completion. They weren't sent to complete you. They were sent to correct you. You thought they were the one who would finally complete you. The missing piece, the calm after the storm, the answer to every tear you ever cried behind closed doors. You told yourself, maybe this is who Allah kept me waiting for. Maybe this is the person who will help me feel whole again. Because they didn't just arrive, they felt right, familiar, so easy to speak to, so natural to care for, so comforting to imagine a future with. You smiled more, you felt safe again. You began to breathe in ways your heart had forgotten. And you started believing that maybe, just maybe, this was the person Allah had created for you. But they weren't sent to complete you. They were sent to correct you. Because only someone who awakens the deepest parts of your heart can also expose the areas of your soul that are still unfinished. You thought they were the healing, but in truth, they were the mirror. Their presence reflected the places in you that were still broken, the parts that still needed to be realigned with your Creator, the wounds you thought had healed, but were just hidden under years of distraction and silence. Through them, Allah showed you what still lived inside your chest, the fears you carry, the expectations you quietly place on people, the hidden belief that someone else can rescue your soul from loneliness. Sometimes Allah sends someone not to stay, but to trigger a change, to touch a soft place that has been neglected for too long, to teach you something your comfort zone could never show you. Because there are parts of you that can only be corrected through the presence and the absence of someone your heart truly cared for. And if they had stayed, you would have never seen it. You would have kept thinking, they complete me. They are the source of my peace. Not realizing you were building your identity around something temporary. And Allah, in His mercy, refused to let your soul become dependent on a creation. So He used them not as punishment, but as correction. Not to shame you, but to save you. Sometimes the people we think are meant to stay forever are only written to walk with us for a few steps. just long enough for us to see ourselves differently, just long enough to feel something that shakes the heart awake. They don't complete you, they reveal you. They open doors inside of you that you didn't even know were locked. Their smile makes you feel valued. Their words make you feel worthy. Their company makes you feel understood. And suddenly you realize how much of yourself you had silenced, just waiting to be seen. But when they leave, you realize something even greater. If someone's presence had the power to make you feel whole, then maybe you weren't as whole as you thought. Allah doesn't want you to be half of a person. He doesn't want your peace to be borrowed from someone else's behavior. He doesn't want your stability to be built on another human's presence. So He allowed someone to come close enough to open your heart, but not close enough to keep it. Because that distance, that heartbreak, that confusion, it brought you back to yourself. And more importantly, it brought you back to Him. You see, the most dangerous kind of emptiness is the one we try to fill with people. And the most powerful kind of correction is the one that comes through love. Love that shakes you. Love that breaks you. Love that opens your soul and whispers, this is not who you are meant to be. There's more. Keep growing. Sometimes Allah uses people to correct our hearts in ways books never could, in ways sermons never reached, in ways that go straight to the soul. Because this isn't just about love. It's about awakening. It's about spiritual alignment. It's about cleaning the heart from the inside out. You thought this was a story about two people, but it was always a story about you and Allah, about how far you drifted, about how tightly you were holding on to people, and how gently Allah wanted you to let go so you could hold on to Him again. Don't be angry that they couldn't stay. Be grateful that they were allowed to come close enough to teach you what still needed to change. That's not failure, that's divine intervention. And maybe one day you'll look back at this love not with pain, but with peace, knowing it didn't complete you, but it corrected you. And through that correction, you became someone new, someone deeper, someone softer, someone closer to Allah. So don't ask why they left. Ask what their presence revealed. Because when Allah sends someone to correct you, He's already preparing someone else to complete you. But only when your heart is ready. Only when you're whole on your own. Only when you no longer confuse correction with completion. Allah removed them because their future didn't fit your prayer. You begged Allah for peace. You asked Him for a love that wouldn't break you. You prayed over and over again, Ya Allah, grant me what's good for my dunya and my akhirah. You didn't ask for something flashy. You didn't ask for something shallow. You just wanted something real, something that would help your heart rest and your soul grow. And when they entered your life, you thought maybe this was it. This was the calm after the storm, the answer after all the waiting, the moment where things would finally make sense. They made you smile in ways no one else had. They spoke to you with softness. They listened to you like your silence meant something. And for a moment, just a moment, you thought Allah had sent you the person who would walk the rest of your journey with you. But then they left. And it didn't feel like divine wisdom. It felt like betrayal. It didn't feel like redirection. It felt like rejection. You kept thinking, why would Allah take away something I asked Him to bless? Why would He allow this to grow only to let it die? But the truth is, Allah didn't just hear your du'as. He studied them. He listened to them with mercy. He knew the exact words you spoke when no one else could hear your whispers. He knew that deep down, you didn't just want any love. You wanted the kind of love that would carry you to Jannah, the kind that would protect your peace, that would water your faith, not drown it. that would support your purpose, not distract you from it. And maybe, just maybe, if this person stayed, their future would have clashed with everything you begged Allah to protect. You only saw the surface. You saw kindness, potential, connection, but Allah saw what you couldn't. He saw the private conversations you didn't hear, the decisions they were going to make down the road, the trials their path would bring you into, the way your heart would slowly lose sight of Him if you kept choosing them. Allah doesn't just answer your prayer for today. He answers your prayer for 10 years from now. He answers your prayer for your akhirah. And sometimes the very person that felt right now would have led you into a storm you couldn't escape later. You see, we ask Allah for protection, but when He removes what we thought was good, we question Him. But isn't that what protection looks like? A door that closes before the fire begins? A departure that saves you before the damage is done? They weren't a bad person. You weren't a bad person. But your futures were not written to walk side by side. And Allah in His mercy removed them before your attachment became your downfall. Sometimes the heartbreak is the blessing. Sometimes Allah doesn't remove someone because they're evil. He removes them because your dua asked for peace and their future carried storms you couldn't yet see. You were asking for a safe home, but they were still building with bricks that would have crumbled under your trust. You were asking for faith, purpose, light, but their path may have taken you away from the very light you were begging to protect. And here's the beauty of Allah. He doesn't just give you what you want. He gives you what you asked for, even when it means breaking what you thought you needed. Their presence would have changed your path. Their influence could have weakened your standards. Their pain might have become your burden. And instead of helping you rise, they may have slowly, quietly pulled you down. But Allah intervened. He removed them while your heart was still soft, while you were still willing to cry in sujood, while you still had the humility to say, Ya Allah, you know, and I don't. Because had they stayed longer, you may have lost more than just love. You may have lost yourself. So no, your prayer wasn't ignored. It was honored. And this heartbreak, this ache in your chest right now, this silence after their exit, it's not proof that Allah abandoned you. It's proof that Allah took your prayer seriously. And now He's preparing something that won't just look like love. It will feel like peace. It won't need to be begged to stay. It won't require you to shrink. It won't test your worth. It will protect your soul because it will be aligned with your purpose. One day, you'll look back and say, Alhamdulillah, they left when they did. Because had they stayed, I may have settled for something that was never meant for my destination. And that's what it means when we say, Allah removed them because their future didn't fit your prayer. What you called love was also longing for yourself. You called it love. And maybe it was real, honest, and deeply felt. But not all love is about the other person. Sometimes love is a mirror, a reflection of something missing inside you, something you were trying to find again. You weren't just loving them, you were loving how you felt around them, how they made you smile, how they made you feel seen, how their presence softened your chaos, even if only for a moment, because before they came, you were empty, lonely, distant from yourself, worn out by life, by waiting, by wondering if your story would ever begin. And when they appeared, suddenly you felt like you were glowing again. Not because they were perfect, but because they awakened a version of you that had gone quiet. You thought, they complete me. But the truth is, they didn't complete you. They reminded you of the parts of yourself that you had abandoned. The part that laughed easily, the part that hoped again, the part that believed you were worthy of being chosen. You call it love. But sometimes what we call love is really just the hunger to feel whole again, to feel wanted, to feel like we matter, to feel like we're enough, not because we finally became perfect, but because someone stayed anyway. And that's where the confusion begins. Because you weren't just loving a person, you were trying to find home in someone else's presence. You were longing to feel like yourself again, to feel safe inside your own skin, to feel like you had value, not for what you gave, but simply for who you are. But here's the thing no one tells you. You don't find yourself in another person. You find yourself when you return to Allah, because no human being can carry the weight of your healing, and no relationship, no matter how beautiful, can replace the need for inner stillness. You placed too much hope in their words. You looked for comfort in their presence. You used their attention to silence the voice inside you that said, "You're not enough unless someone sees you." But Allah didn't create you to live for their eyes. He created you to live for His. And so, when they left, your world fell apart. Not just because you missed them, but because you thought they were your world. You had unknowingly tied your identity to their approval. And when they stopped choosing you, you stopped recognizing yourself. But that's where healing begins. That's where the return starts. Because Allah, in His mercy, allowed them to enter your life, not to complete you, but to show you what you were still missing inside yourself. It wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about redirection, about realizing that the love you were giving them was really a cry for connection with the parts of yourself you forgot. You forgot your own strength. You forgot your worth. You forgot your voice. You forgot that before they came, you were already someone of value in Allah's sight. And Allah couldn't let you continue believing that love from people is what makes you whole. So He let you fall, not to break you, but to reveal you. He took them away so you could finally turn inward and ask the questions you had been avoiding. Why do I only feel lovable when someone else is loving me? Why do I only feel valuable when someone is choosing me? Why do I only feel safe when someone is near? And slowly, painfully, lovingly, Allah starts answering you. Not through replacement, but through rebuilding. You start remembering who you were before the world told you that you weren't enough. You start realizing that your softness is not a weakness, that your sincerity is not something to be ashamed of, that your existence doesn't depend on someone else staying, that your light was never meant to be borrowed. It was meant to shine from within. You see, you weren't just longing for them, you were longing for you, the real you, the one that Allah created with wisdom, the one that didn't need anyone's validation to know they mattered, the one that used to find peace in sujood, the one that used to talk to Allah like He was the only one who understood. And perhaps that's the version of you Allah is calling back now. So no, what you called love wasn't wrong, but it wasn't just love. It was a search, a deep aching search to feel whole again. And now that they're gone, you are finally being given the space to find that wholeness, not in someone else, but in the only one who never leaves. When you find it there, you love again. But this time, not out of emptiness, not out of longing, but from fullness, from knowing that you are already whole, already loved, already seen by the one who wrote your name long before anyone else knew it. Your patience was not wasted, it was witnessed by Allah. You were patient even when it hurt, even when everything in you wanted to scream, to beg, to ask them, why did you leave like that? Didn't you see how much I was holding in for your sake? But you didn't. You chose silence. You chose class. You chose sabr. When they began pulling away, you didn't chase. You didn't argue. You simply stepped back and prayed, not because it didn't matter, it mattered more than anything, but because you believed in something greater than yourself. You believed that Allah saw and that He would respond when the time was right. There were nights when your pillow was soaked, and still you smiled in public. Still you answered Alhamdulillah when people asked how you were. Still you showed up with grace, even though your heart was quietly breaking inside your chest. You watched them drift further, and you wanted so badly to hold on. But you said to yourself, if Allah wrote this for me, it will come back with ease. And if not, then maybe this pain is better than losing my dignity. That's patience. Not just waiting, but waiting without compromising who you are. Not just silence, but silence that comes from faith, not fear. And that kind of patience is seen, it was witnessed by the one who sees even the trembling of your heart when no one else can. You see, Allah is Ash-Shaheed, the all-witnessing. He saw you lower your voice when you had every right to raise it. He saw you delete the message you wanted to send. He saw the tears you wiped before anyone could see. He saw the way you kept your heart clean, even when theirs turned cold. Allah witnessed every moment you sat alone, wrestling with your emotions, and still chose to forgive. Still chose to ask for their khair in your dua. Still chose to say, Ya Allah, if they are not written for me, remove them in a way that doesn't harden my heart. That's not weakness. That's strength of the highest form. And it is never ignored, because the people you were patient for, they may forget. They may never know how much you loved them. They may never realize what you endured quietly on their behalf. But Allah knows, and Allah never forgets. Every moment you bit your tongue, every prayer you whispered instead of complaining, every time you turned to the prayer mat instead of turning to them, it's all written, it's all rewarded, it's all sacred. And the reward for patience, it's not always immediate. Sometimes it doesn't come in the form of a person returning. Sometimes the reward is the person you become because they didn't. The calm you begin to carry, the maturity you develop, the connection you deepen with Allah, the respect you gain for yourself. That's the beauty of sabr. It grows you, it cleans you, it elevates you without ever needing an audience. And that's what you chose. Even when your heart was breaking, you said, I won't beg for someone to love me. I won't punish someone for not choosing me. I'll protect my soul and leave the rest to the one who never turns away. And now, you're being prepared for something far greater than what you lost. Because sabr never leaves you empty-handed. Maybe Allah didn't give you the result you hoped for, but He's giving you something better. A version of you that knows how to wait for what's truly written. A heart that knows it's not weak to be soft. A faith that knows its reward is coming, even if it's silent for now. And one day, you'll look back and realize the silence was loud. The patience was heavy, but it wasn't wasted. It was seen, it was cherished, and it was rewarded in ways you couldn't imagine. Because Allah promises in the Quran, indeed the patient will be given their reward without account. Quran 39:10. So no, your patience wasn't for nothing. It was planting something. And it's only a matter of time before Allah shows you what was growing all along behind the scenes. Because the heart that breaks but stays respectful, the tongue that aches but stays silent, the soul that longs but stays dignified, these are not forgotten. These are honored by the Lord of the heavens and the earth. And soon, so will you be. The departure wasn't cruelty. It was cleansing. It felt cruel, didn't it? How someone could look at you with love in their eyes one day and then walk away like none of it ever mattered. How a connection that felt so real could just dissolve without warning. How someone you made dua for, cried for, trusted, waited for, could let go so easily while you were still holding on. You told yourself, if this was written by Allah, why does it feel like rejection? If they were meant to be part of my story, why did they leave in the middle of the sentence? But what you didn't know is that sometimes Allah removes people not to hurt you, but to clean what's been clinging to your soul for too long. This wasn't cruelty, this was cleansing. Cleansing doesn't always feel gentle. It can feel like your heart is being torn from your chest. It can feel like betrayal, confusion, silence. But it's still mercy in disguise. Because there were parts of you that were building your future around them. There were hopes that depended too heavily on their presence. There were silent compromises you kept making, giving more of yourself than you ever received in return. You kept justifying the imbalance. You told yourself, they'll change, it's just a phase, it's a test for me to be patient. And maybe it was a test, but it wasn't a test of them. It was a test of your ability to let go of what's not meant to grow with you. Allah saw the things you ignored, the subtle ways your self-worth was starting to shrink, the quiet ache in your chest every time you gave more than you received, the way you started bending your boundaries, compromising your peace, silencing your voice, just to keep something that was never meant to be permanent. He knew that if they stayed, you would keep lowering yourself to meet them at their level, instead of rising to meet who Allah is shaping you to become. So He stepped in, not to destroy your story, but to rewrite it. Not to leave you empty, but to prepare you for what's coming. Because your soul was getting heavy. You were carrying emotions that were never yours to carry. You were holding on to someone who had already emotionally left, and the weight of that grief was starting to bleed into your faith. You prayed, but your heart wasn't present. You smiled, but your spirit felt distant. You tried to convince yourself it would work, but deep down, you already knew it was slipping. And so Allah, the one who knows what we hide even from ourselves, intervened. He removed them, not to punish you, but to cleanse you, to remove the attachment that was starting to blur your submission, to cleanse the wounds you had buried under loyalty, to clear the space in your heart for something far more rooted in peace. It felt like they walked away, but in reality, Allah walked you away from what was silently draining you. Because sometimes the longer someone stays, the more damage they do. Not by hurting you outright, but by making you forget who you are when you're with Allah. This heartbreak was His mercy, His way of washing away the layers of expectation you placed on people. His way of wiping clean the illusions you built around them. His way of removing what could have poisoned your path slowly, quietly, without you even realizing it. You were asking for clarity, so He gave you closure. You were asking for strength, so He removed your weakness. You were asking for peace, so He took away what you kept trying to fix, even though it was breaking you more every time. Let that sink in. You weren't abandoned. You were cleansed. Cleansed of false hope. Cleansed of emotional dependency. Cleansed of a path that may have looked pretty, but wasn't going to bring you closer to Allah. And yes, it hurts, but healing often begins with pain, and cleansing often begins with release. You're not who you were before this heartbreak. You're softer. You're wiser. You're learning how to choose peace over attachment. dignity over desperation, trust over control. Because now you see what you called love may have been comfort. What you thought was meant to stay was actually written as a lesson. And what you lost was never more than what Allah is preparing to give you. When something leaves, it doesn't mean you failed. It means something bigger is on the way. But your heart needed to be cleaned first to receive it. So the departure was never cruelty. It was preparation. It was divine tenderness disguised as silence. It was a doorway, not a dead end. Allah saw your heart and it was too full of people. So He emptied it to fill it with Himself. And when you've truly healed, you look back and say, Alhamdulillah, they left because I never would have let go on my own. You didn't lose because you loved. You were loved enough to be saved. You keep replaying it in your head, don't you? Every moment, every smile, every conversation that made you believe this was real. You weren't careless with your heart. You weren't impulsive. You gave your love with intention, with purity, with the kind of softness that only comes from someone who has already been broken before, but still chose to love again. You loved in a way that felt safe. And for a while, it felt like they did too. But then things changed. Suddenly, slowly, painfully. And now here you are, sitting in the silence they left behind, blaming yourself, asking yourself, did I love too much? Was I too available? Did I lose because I cared too deeply? But listen to this very carefully. You didn't lose because you loved. You were loved by Allah enough to be saved before your heart surrendered to something that couldn't carry it. Love, true love, is never a loss. Even if it doesn't last, even if they leave, even if the story ends before it becomes what you imagine. The world may see it as a failed relationship, but heaven may see it as a successful rescue. You see, Allah knew how deeply you love. He knew how your heart works. Once you attach, you give everything. You don't halfway love. You don't pretend. You don't hold back what you feel. And because He knew that, He also knew you needed protection, not from the person, but from the future you were about to tie your soul to. You were about to write your entire life around someone who wasn't going to stay. And Allah in His mercy didn't let you. Not because you weren't worthy of love, not because you weren't enough, but because what you thought was love would have cost you your peace. You were too loyal, too honest, too deeply invested to walk away on your own. So Allah removed them for you. Yes, it felt like rejection, but it was divine redirection. Yes, it felt like abandonment, but it was divine rescue. Yes, it felt like punishment, but it was protection so gentle, you didn't recognize it while you were hurting. Allah saved you from building your life around someone who might not have built with you, from placing your heart in hands that would one day grow tired of holding it, from depending on someone who would have collapsed under the weight of your sincerity. Because here's the truth, no one likes to admit, not everyone who makes your heart feel alive was sent to keep it safe. Some people walk in to awaken you, but Allah walks them out before they can break you. And you should be grateful for that. Grateful that the one who created your heart never let you lose it completely to someone who didn't know how to protect it. Grateful that your story was interrupted before your soul became so tangled in theirs that you couldn't find your way back. Yes, you cried. Yes, it shattered you. Yes, you begged Allah to let it stay. But now, can you see it? Can you see that it was never about losing? It was about being chosen for something greater. You didn't get what you wanted because Allah wanted you to receive what you didn't even know you needed. And had you stayed with what you thought was love, you might have missed the kind of love that actually lasts. That doesn't shake. That doesn't confuse. That doesn't fade as soon as you're no longer easy to love. Allah's love doesn't work like that. It doesn't walk away when you're tired. It doesn't give up when you're in pain. And it certainly doesn't expect you to hide your brokenness to be worthy. And maybe that's what this heartbreak was meant to teach you. That the kind of love you were looking for wasn't something someone else could give. It's something that only Allah can build through you. You needed to break, so He could rebuild you with a strength that no one else gets credit for. You needed to feel abandoned, so you would return to the one who never leaves. You needed to lose what you thought was everything, so Allah could show you that He is everything. And when you understand that, you'll stop saying, I lost, and start saying, I was saved. Because the truth is, some of the biggest blessings from Allah come wrapped in the things we cried hardest to keep. So no, you didn't lose because you loved. You won because Allah loved you enough to pull you away from what looked right on the outside, but would have left you empty on the inside. And one day, when the ache fades, when the memory stops stinging, when your heart beats without hurting, you look back and whisper, Ya Allah, thank you for not giving me what I was begging for. Because now, you're not chasing, you're not forcing, you're not begging to be chosen. You're healing, you're growing, you're returning, and you're learning that being saved doesn't always feel like salvation at first, but it always leads to something greater. Your story isn't over. The chapter just ended before it became your downfall. And in its place, Allah is writing something that will carry your soul, not crush it. So take a deep breath, dry your tears, and remember this: you didn't lose because you loved. You were loved enough to be saved. My brothers, my sisters, you didn't fail because they left. And you weren't abandoned because you loved. Sometimes Allah removes what you thought was your forever simply because He has written something far better, far safer, and far more aligned with your soul. So wipe your tears, hold your dignity, and walk forward knowing this: what Allah takes, He replaces, and what He rewrites will never break you the same way again. Keep trusting Him. He knows what your heart hasn't understood yet.